Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Future of Money Virtual Summit. My name is Ryan Andrew Peterson. I'm the CMO of Conscious Marketer. We are co-producing this event. And on the line today, we have TJ Mattai and Chris Dedow, who will be talking about ICO analyzation. We're excited to have them all the way from Berlin, Germany. John Tarr will be introducing them in just a minute. But first, I just want to give you a preview of what we have in store for you tomorrow and in the upcoming week. Starting tomorrow at 7 a.m., we're going to have Kevin Harrington. He's an American entrepreneur and business executive. A lot of people know him from the show Shark Tank. So he's going to come on and share his expertise about crypto. Following Kevin at 9 a.m., we have Peter Lucy, who's going to be talking about non-correlated risk return. And then at 12 p.m. Pacific, we have Michael Taggart, and he's going to talk about BitShares and blockchain technology and get deep into that. And then at 4 p.m. Pacific, we have John McAfee on the line, the world famous tech CEO and pioneer of the commercial antivirus industry. So that should be an exciting call. And then the last call tomorrow is at 7 p.m. Pacific with Andrew Keen, also seen on the Shark Tank. And he's going to talk about cryptocurrency and blockchain. We also have talks all week next week. So 5 speakers a day. So be sure to tune in and join us. And last thing, under this video, we have some share buttons, Facebook, Twitter, Google. If you could just click those and share this important information with your friends and family, that would be awesome. Social media doesn't allow us to advertise. And yet we have some major players on this summit, and they're talking about the future of technology and digital currencies and really, creating a vision for the future. So we want to try to get this in front of as many people as possible. That would be super helpful. But without further ado, John Tarr, why don't you take us away?
All right. Thanks, Ryan. Hey, welcome back, everybody, to the Future of Money, the world's largest online cryptocurrency summit. I'm John Tarr, entrepreneur, investor, and founder of Totally Crypto. I'm the co-host and co-producer of this event, and I'm super excited because we're going to talk to TJ Mattai and Chris Dedow. It's going to be pretty awesome. Now, here's the thing, and quick disclaimer, because we're going to get into some ICO stuff in a minute. That's what we're going to talk about. So make sure that the content of this summit is provided for informational purposes only. It's not intended to provide any specific tax, accounting, legal, or other investment advice, or provide the basis for any financial or investment decisions. You should always consult with a licensed professional to seek advice specific to your own situation. Now, before I introduce these guys, and I'm excited to talk to them, let me just remind you that you can get their talk as well as the 40 other talks in our cryptocurrency training kit. It's 40 hours of talks, 25 plus speaker bonuses, and a program that Roger Bryan and I created called the Cryptocurrency Mastery Program. The regular price is $497, but you can secure yours right now for $297. In my opinion, it's the most comprehensive training package on the market, so be sure to take advantage of that. Now, TJ Mattai and Chris Dedow, let's talk about them real quick. TJ, and I can tell these guys know their stuff. TJ co-founded and worked as the chief operating officer for a product-based startup company. TJ was responsible for creating sourcing and product development strategies and creating relationships with industrial manufacturers. Chris spent 8 years in financial analysis, management and investment roles. Worked 7 years at the Walt Disney Company in various capacities, focused on corporate financial planning and analysis. Now, later, he managed investments of a multi-million-dollar brokerage focused in the entertainment industry. Now these guys are working on crypto investments, ICOs, and right now they're coming to us from Berlin, right, fellas? 4 a.m.
Yeah, we're here. We're live. The sun is just about coming up. Money doesn't sleep.
Money doesn't sleep. So I appreciate you guys taking the time. We're going to talk about ICOs. We're going to talk about some other stuff. Here's a real quick question we've been asking everybody. I want to ask you guys this. Before we dive into your topic today, share with us your perspective on this question. How do you think crypto will influence the future of money and the world?
That's a loaded question.
Heavy question.
It's a loaded question. Sure. I think it's going to have very, very large implications. We're already seeing it just start to creep into the financial system on a very small scale when you look at the amount of money that's already in existence as far as currencies go. But if you take in the fact fixed assets, the size of the gold market, you're talking trillions, like tens of trillions of dollars. So you're going to have a paradigm shift where everything eventually is going to shift into a digital form of currency rather than physical, because more people now have access to cell phones than they do working toilets. So as far as helping people that traditionally don't have access to bank accounts, this is a logical next step. And we're seeing that, and we're still in the early stages of that happening, but it's going to be big.
Yeah. And I mean, that's more the financial side, which is obviously going to be huge. And the use case for that is massive. I mean, if you look at the assets and the amount of money being exchanged daily through those payment processors, those credit issuers, it's absolutely massive, into the trillions. But then you have, we were talking a little bit before this call about the whole business side of things, how blockchain tech can really enhance and make that, all the entrepreneurs in the world can disrupt the existing industries in the world. I mean, it's crazy to think of that we can now use technology or literally code to remove a central trusted party. The applications are honestly endless. And so I think we're just starting to see the start of that with the recent uptick in what we call these altcoins. And I think the future of that is, I personally think it will replace the internet at some point. Right now it's a layer on top, but the amount of applications that will and should affect is going to be huge.
Well, great answers to those questions, and it's kind of why we put this summit on. We were jamming before the call, and we were talking about just all these different things, that are going into this. It's a financial market, it's a mechanism of payment, it's all kind of stuff. So where do you guys see? You said one of my favorite words, which is market cap. And right now, the market cap of cryptocurrency, the world market, is less than half of Amazon, right? Which is one company on the US stock exchange. I keep telling people that, in my opinion, right, you don't have to be too bright to understand that that's probably going to go up. And so, if you're in now, you're pretty early from just an investing standpoint. What do you guys think as far as that goes? You've been in the market. You said you're in Berlin. You're going to South Korea. I mean, you guys have a pulse on this market.
Yeah, I would like to think so. When we're looking at the market cap, you have to take into account the areas or the sectors that it's disrupting, right? So if you look at just the securities industry, just securitized assets, just in the United States, we're talking $70 trillion in one country. So we're seeing a lot of stuff come out from the SEC right now, potentially changing the landscape here in 2018. But just in the US, if you take existing assets and tokenize them and bring those securities onto the blockchain to allow for easier liquidity, you're talking about an amount of money that is going to just completely dwarf what we're currently seeing. It's going to make the market cap that we're looking at, which is less than half a trillion right now, seem like peanuts.
Yeah. I mean, you have the internet now, which we didn't have before the .com era, because that was the internet, right? So now you have all this transparency while it's happening. There's more volatility probably because of that and because of the nature of crypto, but it's still a bit of a speculative market. We're working towards more adoption and more real implementations of tech. Like you said, unlike, if you compare this to the .com era, the .com era was primarily a VC-backed US market around the internet, right? Which became huge. But if you compare that to the current crypto market, we're talking about a global market. It's no longer a small subset of VC companies investing. We're talking more of a crowdsourced model. It's, like I said, it's global. I mean, some of the highest buying power doesn't come from the States. Even the crowd, the people in the States, right? It's Japan, it's Korea driving a lot of this buying power. And, for obvious reasons, right? Tighter monetary policies. They've seen some of the inflationary things, in Japan and whatnot. So I think if you draw those parallels, it's in my opinion, the top of whatever this wave we will be riding it should be higher than the .com top, which was, I think, 1.5 trillion, if I remember correctly. And so you just had Mike Novogratz on CNBC the other day. I'm sure some of the other speakers have spoken about that. I think he had thrown out a number of 20 trillion. It's hard to really peg that exactly, but I think, in my opinion, definitely far above 1.5. And like you said, we're still really early on, because today I think we just dipped under 100 million.
Yeah. So two things I want to hit off of, kind of a segue off of that. When you say adoption, what are you referring to when you say adoption? And let me just give you my thought, right? And before you agree with me, I'm not very smart. So understand that, right? Before you go rushing in the burning building here. But it's like, people think adoption as a mechanism of payment. And I'm like, no, it has to be adopted as a market. That's where the adoption, as confidence in the market gets and grows, and there's more adoption and more investing money, people have confidence, that's when it grows. What's your take on that?
Yeah, absolutely. When I speak of adoption, I guess when I was saying that, I actually primarily meant it around the business side of things. And that's kind of where I come from. I spent 5-6 years doing mergers and acquisitions, tech strategy for corporate America after my startup. And so I think when I speak about adoption, I'm really referring to end users in the space and businesses, because we all know that there's endless applications, whether it's business functions, technology functions, the Internet of Things, right? Literally, things will be using this. It's hard to imagine for those of us that aren't tech focused. And then you have people using it. So any application in business is ripe for disruption on this type of tech. And I think the best use cases, the best implementations of this are going to be companies that are like the Apples, that create this very eloquent user experience that is so easy to use. You and I, the average person out there uses an Apple device. They don't know what technology stack it's running on. They don't know if it's Java, HTML, you name it, right? But they just know it works really, really well. And so when I speak of adoption, it literally has to be picked up by these companies, these verticals, and devices, applications, these new dApps that people are referring to, which is just a distributed application, right? Those types of things, the back end will just be switched over to this new blockchain tech or this distributed ledger tech. And I think in the best use cases, that just no one will know, but that's the type of adoption that I am referring to.
Yeah, he hit the nail on the head when he said, you start to see it when you actually don't see it. When people are using the technology and they don't actually know that it's being built on top of blockchain, or it's not dealing with these microtransactions in the background, that's when we've actually reached true mass adoption. Mm-hmm. Because before now, we haven't had mechanisms that would allow microtransactions to happen. We'll potentially be able to move forward where people will be able to make money on a fraction of a cent basis based on readership volume just for going to their page, right. Not necessarily dealing with advertisements. You might just make a microtransaction to read by an article to article basis.
Yeah.
So the market is just going to completely shift how and when we do things.
Yeah. I mean, and you could take that further, right? You look at Yelp as an example, and I think we've all used it or heard of it. Personally, as a user, I don't think it's very good, because you have these problems that have come about where Yelp favors companies or restaurants that pay for their ads, right? So those come to the top. You have the whole problem of really any industry about KYC, of people manipulating end users to get fake reviews or favorable reviews. And so blockchain's a perfect use case for disrupting that app or that industry, right? Taking away Yelp, that trusted party that we are relying on to give us positive results when we search for restaurants, replacing that with untrusted technology that we rely on. And we're actually, we do a lot of advising for SEOs, like you mentioned, and we actually just picked one up who's working on a key part of that, which is creating a trust engine for any blockchain, which would be a great use case for this new Yelp. I don't know who's going to do it or someone starting it. I would love them to do it. So.
That's cool because, yeah, I think a lot of people don't understand just how right now, I mean, advertising on the internet is pretty centralized, right? You have Facebook, you have Google, and I have a friend of mine who's a psychologist who did a whole study that was featured on CNN about the last presidential election, and it wasn't about Russia. It was about how Google and the search engines were manipulating the results. And I won't comment or anything; people can read it, but that's interesting that you brought up blockchain and how it might be able to impact that. So I think that's pretty cool. Something I hadn't really been thinking about.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's another. I mean, literally, it's endless. I say that like people probably don't believe it, but truly, every single industry. I mean, you say advertising, right? And there's really a broader theme that is after that. It's there. All of these platforms today are controlled by one or two or three companies: the Googles, the Facebooks, the Amazons. At almost every web services application or anything in the cloud, you've heard of the cloud, that's probably on an Amazon server, which means they control at the end of the day what if they can cut that off, they can route traffic somewhere else, they can throttle that. The ISP is Comcast, that's centralized as well, right? They have the ultimate say. If they're competing with somebody and you're hosting something on their service, well, they're going to probably, it's in their business interest for their shareholders to favor certain things. And so if you're an end user of another application or another service that you like, I mean, it's not in your best interest as an end user to necessarily have these central parties. And I think kind of the rules hold over our eyes for much of history, and internet's slowly been unraveling that, and blockchain now will further help to make that public as far as what's happening. And so, yeah, it's really, really interesting. And of course, you can take that even further. The bigger problem is the data problem, right? After the advertising central parties, they hold all your data as a person. And I mean, that's incredibly valuable if you think of artificial intelligence and things like that, what you can do with that data.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So I want to segue for a second because I want to get into the ICO market. But before I do that, my question to you, as we segue there, is you talked about basically adoption and you're talking about building infrastructure. Who do you think is going to lead that charge? Is it going to be small entrepreneurs or is it going to be big companies like the Amazons and the Microsofts and the Chases of the world? Are these the guys that are leading the charge, or is it going to be, you know, Bill Gates in his garage 35, 40 years ago?
Well, I obviously root for the person in the garage, but you're gonna have the role from both sides play a large part in this because you're having a huge paradigm shift of potential wealth, how currencies are being utilized across the world, whether they're associated with a government or a country, or if they're completely separate from any political entity. It's going to require a lot of hands to make that shift go smoothly. And I think the people that are the entrepreneurs, the smaller fighters, if you will, they're going to drive a lot of the entry level change. But there's definitely going to be a play where people who have larger bank accounts or established companies, that if they want to help shift things in those general directions, it's going to take money and it's going to take legal power to make that shift happen. I mean, a lot of people have mixed opinions about Ripple, which is one of the top companies by market cap in cryptocurrency in general. But a lot of people don't, I think, put enough weight on the fact that regardless of if you agree with the company and how they're approaching things, they have a ton of money behind them now because of having such a large market cap. And when it comes to defending the overall cryptocurrency market, because they are part of that market, whether they classify themselves as a currency or not, they're going to have that proper legal backing to go to bat for everyone that's associated in the same sector. So I think both roles will play a very integral piece to moving this market forward.
Awesome. Now, let's talk about that. You're a regular entrepreneur, you're a guy, maybe not in a garage, but your small team. Recently, they've been going to this crypto market, this world market, to raise money in a non-regulated fashion. They don't have to give up equity to their company. They basically can go in there, raise money for this technology, and then do what they want because they're not answering to VC people. They're not answering to anybody else. How do you guys feel that regulation it's playing a role? What's the state of the ICO market right now with you guys being so in touch to that?
Yeah, it's a little, it's a little bit of the Wild West, and I think it always has been, right? If you're talking about something kind of sprouting up online, multi-country, multi-region, no regulations, right? I mean, it's always a little bit of the Wild West. And obviously, we've seen as the market cap has grown in general with crypto, a lot of what's been driving that the past year has been these altcoins or these ICOs, which I think the first one happened a few years ago. And then Ethereum was one of the few after that, which really, they only raised 20 million, right? I think in 2013, if not, it was 2015. Don't quote me on the year, but we all know what the market cap of that is now, right? It's massive. So yeah, it's a bit of the Wild West, and I think there's a lot of money getting raised, and there's a lot of people giving their money, whether it's private sale, pre-sale, all these different tiers of this ICO, which is basically the new IPO, right? And I do think there's a lot of scams out there. We find a very small percentage of it. We look at hundreds a week at least, and we've been doing this for at least 1 year on the ICO space specifically. And we find probably 95% plus are pure scams, or they're just not good quality. And so, and we're professional corporate analysts, in the past. And so we have a pretty keen eye on this stuff. And so if you're not really in the tech space or the analysis space, this stuff you may not be able to catch it. And so I think with that said, there is some room, I think personally, for, modest regulation, or at least helping to educate consumers in some fashion to help prevent some of the fraud that has been happening. Because a lot of those people who coin themselves, libertarian, who don't like regulation, at the end of the day, there's a lot of people that succumb to that stuff. I think there's definitely a balance there. And so while it's nice to have a free market and everything, there's just so much scams that we go through on a daily basis and honestly, it's tough to find. But yeah, it's kind of crazy out there.
Yeah, I mean, going off of some of that, there's kind of two camps. It's like regulation's going to come in some way, shape, or form, and some are taking the approach of, hey, why don't we try to self-regulate or steer the ship in the general right direction? So when it comes to regulation coming, we can either have a say in the process, or B, protect against issues happening, that it's not deemed a negative to society if the shift is happening. So kind of going from what you're saying with ICOs being a unique fundraising tool, we're seeing some of that shift happening, because before, as TJ was mentioning with the Wild Wild West happening, we're starting to see more layered approaches to how those funds are being collected. We're seeing some of the more traditional requirements that venture capitalists would go through prior to an IPO. We're seeing that being brought into the cryptocurrency space. So you're seeing funds being locked up for certain percent or a certain amount of time. So instead of just collecting $20 million and then just immediately having access to that in your account, people are being held accountable, saying, all right, we're going to have a typical vesting cliff over 4 years. You're going to get access to tokens 25% per year after 12 months each year. So the team's more in line with the community who helped do the contribution for the ICO, which is extremely important if we really want the market to have longevity. Otherwise, if someone has $20 million in their bank account, you're not very incentivized to do a ton of work. Yeah. That's why you see some of these quote scams happening, because people are like, well, I'm just literally going to go buy a Lambo and just live on an island. Yeah. But you have to have some type of accountability or regulatory structure to keep that from happening.
But John, to your point, it's like, where when I say modest regulation, what I mean is, like you said, you're raising funds and there's no equity and there's really no one to answer, right? And so it's not really fair to the end user. And so there should be something where if you invest in a project, you should get a share of some benefit somehow. And they've been using the term utility. I'm not going to argue if it's utility security, but they've been using the term utility to be able to raise these things, but at the end of the day, it's intended to replace, in some cases, right, the IPO or the traditional fundraising rounds. And so they're getting around the regulations, but then it's also potentially, we haven't seen it yet because we haven't gotten mature enough in the market, but there's potential, huge negatives for investors down the road, because if a company like Hashgraph, for example, raises 20 million at a $6 billion valuation, which is what they did, which is crazy in my opinion. That's a utility token, right? And those private sale people are holding a utility token, and there's no right for them. There's no right of the company. There's no voting rights. And whether they build that into a white paper or not, at the end of the day, the way they're building it, it's not equity. So there's something there. And then I think one more thing I want to plug on that is, it's kind of uncovered, this whole process has uncovered this dinosaur rule set of the SEC about this whole accredited investor rule, right? Which is, if you're rich, you're able to invest in certain things, and if you're not, you can't. And so it basically replaces wealth as a standard instead of intelligence. And I think that's vastly misstated and incorrect. And hopefully soon they'll change that to be, if you're smart enough or be able to pass some course, maybe, I don't know how they'll do it, but it shouldn't be to enable you to invest in something.
Yeah, Adrian Ashley, our co-host, mentioned, let's make them pass a course. Here's a question. So we've got U.S. regulation, and it's designed to protect, my grandma, right? It's designed to protect my grandma. Maybe grandma wants to be protected, right? Maybe grandma wants to be protected. People that want to generate wealth, maybe not so much. There's a fine line there, and I don't know where it should end and begin. Like, I love the ICO market, made some really good plays there, but it's kind of I don't know. It's a complex situation for sure.
Yeah, it's tough when you talk about where to draw that line, and whether you have the course where you just say, like, grandma, there are definitely certain people that I'm aware of, or especially the older crowd, that just, you're talking about technology, which is just a new thing for them. And you're talking about private keys and public keys. And then you're talking about, do they invest in certain protocol infrastructures? And then way over their head, right? And they might have the money, but they have no idea what they'd be investing in. So it's like, do you let them opt out? Do you where do you draw that line so that there's not tons and tons of people getting scammed into these things by great, fake ICOs or pseudo real ICOs, right? And it's funny because we see a lot of Chinese ICOs come out, and obviously there's always been a little bit of a language barrier between East and the West. And, I think it's mostly translation, but you'll see certain things are just not as used to having, it's not as transparent in the culture. That's kind of the way that they operate. And so when you look at maybe like an American ICO, they're used to the SEC and all these addresses and names and blah, blah, blah. And then you add the language barrier on top of that, and it's hard to tell, is this legit or not? And that adds a whole nother layer on top of what we're talking about to the complexity of the ICO market.
Okay. So here's a question now. You've got this ICO market, Totally Crypto, the group on Facebook that I have is 43,000 people. About 65% of those people are outside the United States. So a lot of people that watch this in the United States are very US centered, right? Everything, accredited investors, this kind of stuff, regulation. But this crypto market, as you mentioned, it's a world market, right? Asia's leading this market. What are you guys seeing on the projects that you're involved in from a world regulatory standpoint?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a couple things. One, projects, unfortunately, a lot of them are being advised to open up shop or form their official companies outside of the United States, just to mitigate legal risk, to simplify the legal process. Because if you go through the traditional securities regulations and even comply with Reg Ds, et cetera, it can easily get up to like $1 million in legal fees before you even finish ICO. So it's a lot of money going in the pocket. It's not actually building anything, right? Mm-hmm. So what a lot of companies are doing is they're being told to just just completely skip over the U.S. market. Don't even try to raise funds there because it might be 15% of your overall raise amount, but it'll be 85% of your headaches.
Yeah.
So just put more of your marketing spend a little more in other areas, and you'll get it outside of the United States anyway, which is it's problematic because we're both from the Midwest. We don't want to see the U.S. fall behind from regulatory issues when we're known to have a strong tech community within the United States. San Francisco has obviously been a very big hub. We've seen it pop up in New York, Los Angeles. We're helping trying to grow that in Puerto Rico right now. Our residence is down there. Our residency's down there.
And it makes it hard, right? We advise a lot of these ICOs, work with them at very early stages. And so when you have, like I said earlier, it's unlike the .com era. This is not US only, it's worldwide. So you are now dealing with endless amount of countries and their regulations, and it just creates a legal nightmare for these ICOs. And it's not like it's constant, right? It's always changing. I talk about the Dedow cycle, which basically happens when you have when there's a death, basically, right? It's like denial, acceptance, blah, blah. I don't know all of them off the top of my head, but the countries go through this process because, like you said, this technology is so disruptive. It is honestly, in my opinion, I think a lot of others, probably you as well, one of the most disruptive things in our lifetime, bigger than the internet. I mean, it really is that, but that has that much potential. And so, especially on the financial side and the monetary side, right? When these countries see this, they're thinking, "Oh my God, our central currency is dead." Right? They're seeing the potential in how literally users from around the world, without a central party, without a central government, can come together and create something to replace the currency. And we all know if you take away the money, you take away the power, right? And so, I think we're into this really interesting landscape of countries competing and so on and so forth. But I'm jumping ahead, but like my point was on the ICO space is changing all the time. And you just see that data cycle happening where some countries will deny and then they'll come back. We saw China was one of the first to ban everything basically. And then Korea was originally at that time favorable. And now we're seeing China come back around. Okay, maybe we're starting to understand it. We're starting to welcome it because, if we don't, we might be dead in the water. And now Korea is saying also they went down the denial path. Now we're one of the biggest markets. Our business sectors, if we ban ICOs, we might hurt our business sector and ultimately our income and our GDP. And so now they're re-legalizing ICOs. And then you have Japan. Now they're banning all of the privacy currencies because that lets people hide their money, right? Essentially, one of the mechanisms of privacy currencies is that you can be anonymous, which is what the early money we had was, right? The cash system. No one knew who you were if you were spending dollars. You just had $1, right? So it's funny to see all these cycles of these countries happen at the same time. It's really, really complex and really confusing for these ICOs and investors, honestly.
And so your clients, are they able, so to put it in perspective to my clients who are mostly American investors, we have a bunch of different information products we sell, and we were hitting home run after home run on these ICOs. And we had a few, stink bombs too, but we're hitting home run after home run, and then dried up like a raisin, right? There's no more ICOs because they're ignoring us. Are your clients having any issue raising money out there in the world market, or is it still just happening for them?
Well, it's always going to be harder to raise money in a bear market, right? But there's still going to be opportunities to raise funds. You just might have to go about a slightly different approach. It might be as simple as just on a larger amount for marketing spend. So we're not seeing it dry up. I think people are definitely excited to see the market turn around because it's definitely been in a lull for pretty much all of 2018 so far. But if you step out a second and look at it from the beginning of 2017, Bitcoin's still up like very, very strongly from where it was. I think it was around 1,000 at the beginning of 2017. It's still at around 7, maybe it touched the 6,000 marks, within the last 24 hours. But
I think when we look at the ICO market, it's not necessarily an issue that you can't sell to the US. It definitely isn't ideal. I mean, we're seeing more countries ban, exclude users from these countries. US, China's popular to be excluded. Canada now, South Korea until they finalize that re-legalization. But I really think the future when it comes to the ICO market is, I mean, you heard the SEC head on CNBC this past week basically say, true cryptocurrencies, the Bitcoins, the Litecoins, yes, those are not securities. But he, this was unofficial, of course, but he literally said, if you're taking money for a vendor, which in very broad definition is mostly or all of these ICOs, I don't really agree with that, but he said, if you do that, you're a security. And so if they ever formalize that opinion, I think there's going to be a very tumultuous market. But the long term is those will probably have to go through the process of converting to the security token model. And I think that's really the future of ICOs and blockchain in general.
Cool. And so you see the ICO market potentially heating up again once maybe there's a little more clarity in some of these countries.
Yeah, I think definitely if you talk about the countries that are excluded, once, especially if we take the U.S. for example, once we clear up some of the regulatory issues and we get this security token process moving, I really think that's the future. And I think it's no longer, I mean, the ICO process has really squeezed the venture model, and I don't think the old school venture model is coming back fully. I don't think the full crowd sale model is staying either. I think there's probably a happy medium in the middle where there's some VC funding, but also some of this smart crowd-sourced funding where there are people who can contribute and build a network early around companies and products. Because one of the major problems that companies have today is you need to build a community in many cases around your product, company, or service. And that is no easy task, and it will never be an easy task. But if you get certain strategic people in early, the more the better in some cases. You can start to build a network from the ground up and help users have. Can you finish this? Help build your product for you along the way.
Yeah, I think what you're going to see is ICOs aren't going to go away, but you might see the terminology change. And what I mean is you're going to have ICOs. We've been heavily focused on infrastructure projects because they're basically like the foundation, the base layer of this new world that we're essentially trying to help build, right? Well, over time, once those platforms are chosen, kind of like Betamax versus VHS, once VHS was decided, even though it was a inferior technology, once the market adopted it, it took off and Betamax just kind of appeared. So if you have a base level like Ethereum that potentially gets accepted, you'll still have ICOs that are built on top of that to help expand out that ecosystem. But we're also going to see the shift, like I mentioned earlier, and like Tej mentioned, is that you're going to see a lot more security. So you won't hear ICO as much anymore. You'll hear STO, which is a securities token offering. So you're going to have, that's where the regulation is going to come in, but it's going to allow for things to go more smoothly, at least in the SEC's eyes, right? So you'll be able to find stuff. You'll actually have ownership in some way, shape, or form in that company. Eventually, you'll probably have some type of voting rights to make sure that the leaders of that company are running it in a proper fashion in best interest of the token holders. So I don't think it's going away anytime soon. I think it's going to greatly expand. I think you're just see a shift in a lot of the market being around securities, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think they're going to tokenize everything too. I mean, if you look at one of the things I'm really excited about and passionate about is real estate. And if you think about the capabilities or the possibilities for tokenizing real estate, I mean, it is huge. I mean, you have all of anything that's a big asset that few people could purchase previously. You have the opportunity to now tokenize with this technology and reduce a lot of the overhead and the third-party costs. I mean, can you just imagine now? You could never, most people could never own a huge skyscraper or something. But now by tokenized real estate, literally anybody has the opportunity to buy, potentially, if they put it up, tokenize as a piece of, the Empire State Building or whatever, right? It's really exciting what they'll be able to do with that.
Yeah, I think that's really neat. I'd never really thought about that. And it seems to be sort of this theme, one of the themes of the summit coming in, what you guys are saying. Here's my question about that. where do these tokenized assets, if with all this regulation, potential regulation, with all this ambiguity, where do these transactions take place? In the meantime, where are they going to take place?
I mean, it's a great question. So, I mean, there's existing exchanges that operate for the traditional ICO market that we've been involved with. But as things become securitized, they'll have to be on exchanges that have proper licensing. So you'll have money licensing, money transmitter licenses, dealer broker licenses. So you're seeing that already come into play with Coinbase coming after that, with Circle, who was purchased by JP Morgan Chase, I believe. You're already seeing that shift to make sure that there is a platform for these assets to be legally exchanged, specifically within the United States. So there's going to be a huge shift towards that, and people are pouring tons and tons of money into that right now. I know Coinbase just recently, in the past couple of weeks, acquired a company specifically just so they could more easily get access to a proper dealer brokerage license, because you're going to have to potentially get those licenses in all 50 states if you want to accept money in the continental U.S., Alaska, and Hawaii. And that's just the United States. So there's going to be a lot of regulatory issues there that might slow it a little bit, but you're definitely going to see that here in 2018, I think.
Now, okay, so one of those exchanges, Sprocket, which is Fred Thiel's project. Fred was on yesterday, and he mentioned his vision, or what he thought was going to happen, is the crypto market was going to get it basically was going to get consolidated into the other market. What do you guys think about that? What do you see there?
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing, like Chris said, we're seeing the M&A race kind of heat up because there's all of this new tech as far as bridging that old centralized banking infrastructure with this new kind of decentralized blockchain distributed ledger tech. So we're starting to see that M&A race heat up between Coinbase and the JP Morgans, the old, banks, and who can snatch up the right pieces of tech to really build those on-ramps, from fiat into the system, and then B, get that custodial infrastructure in place, which is completely different, obviously, than it has been in the past. And so we're seeing that heat up to see who can really win that race between kind of the new guys, the Coinbase versus old money, which we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, I mean, you're already seeing hints coming from representatives at like NASDAQ saying they're looking at potentially offering cryptocurrencies in the future on their platform. Why wouldn't they if they're going to make money off of it, especially if it becomes part of a proper legal structure with securitizing, the assets that they would have in that platform. I think right now what we're seeing with, like the platform that you mentioned for the person who was recently on your show, is that you have an opportunity to potentially have first mover advantage with these new technologies. So if you can build out an exchange and get there first, maybe you're specifically focused on a niche with real estate, like TJ was mentioning, you potentially put yourself in a very, very nice position to basically become the trifecta, like the go-to area to trade anything that is a securitized piece of real estate. And then, it's not a bad scenario if one of the big boys comes by and gobbles you up for tens of millions, hundreds of millions, or even billions of dollars.
Be nice. Great.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with a couple billion, right? That's what's up pretty nice. So are there two things I'll ask here. You don't have to answer them if you don't want to. I've already given the disclaimer that we're not giving investment advice, but I'm curious, are there any coins that you guys see right now that you dig, you like the technology? You don't have to say whether you own it or anything. I'm just curious, is there anything that you really like?
Yeah, I won't necessarily mention you specifically, maybe I will, but there's this new theme of what we like to call the passive income coins, and these are the coins that you can stake. Usually, you stake on a server. It's fairly simple if you know some technology, but you stake them on a server and basically perform certain functions on the network, usually around validators. So Zen Cash is an example, and you buy a certain amount of coins needed for this, and you stake that. And so not only can you hold an asset that you might believe in, but you are able to make passive income on that asset. And it's a really great way to participate, not only make money in the process, literally passive income, but also get the appreciation of the underlying asset. So those are the type of things that I'm really looking forward to, the quality networks that pay you money to hold it. And so those are the things I'm looking at personally.
Cool.
And he touched on Zencash a little bit. So it's actually been recently invested in by Digital Currency Group, which is one of the biggest players in the space. One of the reasons why they went into it specifically, I believe it's Barry Silbert, who's the co-founder of that. He commented that 10% of global wealth is kept in offshore accounts. 10%. So if you're talking about a currency that transcends borders, that allows you to transact publicly or privately, it's up to you. It becomes very interesting potential opportunity and avenue for people to store their money in the future. So we're looking at that, and we have very strong backgrounds in fintech in general. So we tend to gravitate to those just because we understand them very, very intimately. So we're looking at the loan space as well. Another company we've been looking at is Celsius, just because they're trying to actually bring traditional loan markets into the crypto space. Because if I have a ton of money personally in the crypto space, a bank doesn't recognize that if I want to take a loan out to put a down payment on a home. They're going to be like, crypto, that means absolutely nothing to me. If I had $100,000 in the bank account in USD, then they would talk to me. If I had traditional stocks, they would listen to me. But with crypto, it's too new, too soon at this point that there's no one that's lending money for people who have a lot of their assets currently in crypto. So that's one of the companies that's looking at bringing that opportunity to the crypto space. So we tend to look at projects like that it's easy to connect the dots of what already exists and just bringing it to the new money, the new future of money.
Yeah, that's really awesome. And yeah, that's great too, because as a cat that has crypto, it's like, it'd be nice, if you could, redeploy, so to speak, So, okay, you guys are super smart dudes. I've enjoyed this. Tell me, you talked about on-ramps, right? So like the internet back in the day, you got the sort of, it's just popping up. It's a little cursor before Prodigy and all that kind of stuff. What has not been created yet that you guys are going to be like, damn, when somebody figures it out? What is that's coming?
Yeah. Oh, well, I'll tell you what, because we're in the space so much, and because we have entrepreneurship and fintech backgrounds, we have ideas weekly. So they range really, really small ideas to big ideas. And so I think one interesting thing that I would love to see how they could figure this out. I have a couple ideas. Is we've seen a few people actually die recently and have their private keys, with them somewhere on their laptop, and then money is just gone, right? So I think some sort of a will system, a blockchain, will be extremely valuable to people. And eventually, when all of that, like we talked about the on-ramp, when all of the other assets become, accessible or placed on the blockchain, you'll literally just have probably a smart contract in the future. And when you die, it'll probably just be distributed like that, right? So that's one of the ideas I have. And I think the other one is this idea earlier, the Yelps, as far as like all of these apps that people use today, and there's a central party that's just potentially might act in a poor way. There's so many use cases that you could apply to those.
Yeah, I mean, you have a lot of manipulation happening in social platforms in general. Twitter is a platform where anyone can talk, which is amazing to obviously have the opportunity for free speech, but you also have a ton of people plaguing it with fake accounts. In the crypto sphere in particular, you have a lot of people posting things that are putting people's money at risk because they're saying, oh, well, we'll give you money, just sign up here. And those are clear scams. But if you actually had a structure in place to be able to classify that it's in fact a real person, potentially giving one individual an ID that's tied to you specifically, then you wouldn't have this ability to potentially have one user who controls 100 accounts that are actually just bots. So there's a lot that could be altered for sure.
Yeah, cool. Good answers there. And so as we sort of close, did I miss anything that you guys wanted to chat about?
I mean, I'll just say, reiterate on the ICO space. We have a rigorous process analysis. We've created a framework really over the past few years of doing this that we've pulled from our M&A experience, and we're very thorough. We do our due diligence, and so I'd say if anyone out there looking at ICOs, make sure you do the research. There's no substitute for reading the entire white paper. There's no substitute for validating the people, validating the partnerships, validating the competitors. I mean, it's a rigorous process, and you're putting your money at stake. So people like to joke a lot about Lambos and moons. It's fun, and to do that and hodl, but you're risking your real money, and so it's really important to do the research. And so on our channel, Coin Hacker, we look at hundreds of these a week, and we have a team of analysts that bring us these things, and our network brings us others, and we just live it, and we just put in the work, and that's really what we do on a daily basis. And if you want to do it yourself, it's great and it's fun, but there's no excuse for doing the research.
Cool. Coin Hacker on YouTube, right?
Yep, you can find us at Coin Hacker on YouTube, and we have a Telegram you can find as well on the links center page.
Awesome. Okay, so that's sort of, if you're in the market, you want to get in ICOs, that's sort of an advance, like, hey, here's what you do. What if I'm a beginner, right? I heard about Bitcoin, sounds pretty cool. I don't know what's going on. I'm not real techie. What do you tell those folks? Same thing?
Well, so you always want to obviously start researching before you just dump money into anything, right? So we definitely say start with the basics. There's definitely resources out there. We have some of them on our own website at coinhacker.io. But really what you want to do is take the time to read, join communities, whether that's, through, this show is obviously a great start for someone to really get their feet wet with a ton of information. If you're offering, 40 hours plus of material, that's a huge value that you can take the time to make sure that you're going about it the right way.
Get in these groups, get in these networks, because that's the best way. Cross-pollination, talk with each other, making each other learn. And, if you're getting your information from Reddit, just know that that's available to everybody, right? So the further you can build yourself up, the more exclusive circles you can find yourself in. Past and any mechanism in history, I've found that is the best way to learn, is to find people who are smarter than you, learning from them, and then keep upping your knowledge level, your game, until you get to the point where you are that expert.
Yeah. It helps to focus on areas that you already have familiarity with too. So I mentioned that TJ and I have strong backgrounds in finance and technology. So we naturally gravitate to there because we can understand it intimately. So if you're in the supply chain space, maybe it's better for you to focus on supply chain type companies that are utilizing blockchain tech to advance that industry. So there might be specific ICOs just for supply chain. So if you know it, focus there. It'll be way easier. It's like reading a book that you actually understand before trying to read it in Spanish. It's like, don't make it harder than it needs to be.
And one other thing too, everyone's got ADD of shiny object syndrome, right? Everyone's trading on a 5-minute chart, and it's like, no, it's so volatile. You can't catch a falling knife. You can't predict the future. Find something find something you like, put in the real time. Don't FOMO in. The market's going to go up 50, 100% a day. That's just normal, right? Do the research, make the bet you want to bet for the next year to two, whatever it is, make it smart. And then, just go in when you can. Don't FOMO in. So the market's going to be there. Just make the right decision.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I think that's great advice, guys, and a great talk. Thank you. You guys are super intelligent. I'm going to start following you. I loved watching it, and it's just great. So we appreciate you coming on.
Thanks so much, man. We really appreciate the time. We love educating people. If anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out. We try to respond to everybody.
Yeah, we've gotten some good stuff in Totally Crypto on Facebook too. So right back at you. Really appreciate it. It's fun to actually put a face with the name.
Yeah, cool, man. Thank you. And one more time, your channel on YouTube.
You can find us on Coin Hacker on YouTube. And then there you'll find all the links to our website and our Telegram channel.
All right, TJ and Chris, thank you guys. We appreciate it.
Have a great day.
Yeah, you too. Yeah, your day's just starting, so you guys enjoy it over there. Thank you. I know you had to get up early over there.
No problem. Thank you.
No problem.
All right. So, guys, as we wind down tonight, I want to remind everyone that you can own this entire training summit through our cryptocurrency kit. You'll get TJ and Chris's talk. You get over 40 speakers, all for $297. You're also going to get a special bonus training called the Crypto Mastery Program that Roger, Brian, and I are producing right now. After the summit, the price of this training program is going to go to $497. So if you'd like to own the materials and refer back to them, now is the time. As we close, on behalf of the Future Money Summit team, I want to thank TJ and Chris again. I want to thank everybody for coming on here and watching us, being a part of this summit. Go to Totally Crypto on Facebook. Leave your comments. We want to talk about the summit and start having a discussion around it. To our team, Ryan, Rich, Stefan, Sarah, Letitia, Erica, everybody that helps us, Denise, Todd, Kristen, Roger, and Adrian, thank you so much. You guys are amazing, and we'll see you tomorrow.